What's going on, people? Welcome back once again. And today, on this special edition of the Wayne Carlin Show, we're going to profile, as you see here, politics and race, a case study. So we want you to put on your thinking caps and let's get ready for this thought-provoking edition of the Wayne Carlin Show. Let's go. All right on. Thank you for that beat, sir. As y'all can see today, I am surrounded by Charleston men, which is pretty cool, So I want to welcome everybody to today's episode of the Wayne Carlin Show. And today, we're going to ask some questions about our political processes and how people are selected for positions in our federal government. You know, I spent 25 years in the federal government. These gentlemen will let you know about them. They also have experience in that area. And this is a very personal topic for all of us here because we happen to know somebody who has seemingly been passed over for one of these positions. And on today's show, we're going to analyze that and try to see what happened. So for those of you who don't know, I'm Wayne coming at you from the West Coast, California.
Yeah, and I'm Carlin coming to you from the Gulf Coast down here in Texas. And not only do we have the Wayne Carlin Show today, but we have the Wayne Carlin Dwayne Show today because we got my brother Dwayne on, and he's going to give us some of that insight, which we often need on the political front because he is politically savvy, very savvy. And so we're going to use some of his input today as we analyze what we call the politics of race and a case study. And we're going to happen to use this new nominee for the director of the ATF. We're going to use that, and we're going to just kind of analyze that as we go through that. So it'll be pretty interesting. So Dwayne, say hello to everybody.
Hey, how y'all doing? Glad to be back on this show.
Hey, glad to have you back on here. And hey, we're gonna get right to it.
Before you go, do I need to referee between you guys today, or is it gonna be nice and smooth? What?
Yeah, see, that's kind of strange because most people think whenever me and Dwayne are on, they got a referee, but this is a different story today. All right, I know it's uncommon, so this will catch everybody by surprise. But this is
might. I mean, you never know what we might delve into. But starting off, we're pretty much on the same page for a change. But you never know. Never know.
You never know.
All right.
Yeah. So without any further ado, because I really do, we want to kind of like get right to the issues here. I want to go to this video that we've got to play today because it kind of sets the stage. And Dwayne, I want you to kind of watch this and then give us your view on this, because I think it says a lot about what we're going to talk about in today's show. So let's go ahead and we'll watch about 2 minutes of this, and then we'll get
okay.
Comment.
All right.
Especially when talking about this new nominee, Biden's new pick, Avery, it is going to be forced to deal with this. I mean, if you look at the first ATF nominee, David Chipman, last year, met all those concerns from lawmakers. He was out. So let's talk about what now lies ahead for this nominee, if so confirmed, and why this process has been so drawn out, why it's taken so long to get ahead of the ATF.
Right, and I think this goes back to, and I almost feel like a broken record when I speak about this, but it's because the Senate is so narrowly, the margins are so narrow. The fact that Democrats have this majority, a very slim majority of 50-50 Senate, it makes it difficult for the Senate to pass some of these nominees. And so, yes, Dettelbach, he is a former federal attorney. And so the hope is that because he has been confirmed before, that this might be an easier path to get this nominee over the line and into that position rather than keeping that career interim director in its place. So if you talk to the Biden administration, this is also about taking an aggressive stance and an aggressive approach to address gun violence.
So what could that aggressive approach look like, Brad, if indeed, Dettelbach gets this position, heads the ATF? What is he going to have to tackle first?
Well, the big issue that every ATF director has had to tackle are folks that are pro-Second Amendment and pro-gun rights. They like ghost guns because they think it's their inherent right to build, make, assemble firearms any way of their choosing. And so it's been a huge issue in Congress getting people permanently approved as the ATF director. You may or may not know this, but for years there's been a fight to even let ATF become automated. There are times when guns are recovered that ATF actually has to go to a warehouse and manually go through gun permits from various dealers around the country. This is all driven basically because the concern of oversight of firearms. And so every ATF director ends up dealing with this, and it becomes a thorny issue every time trying to get one confirmed. So if he gets confirmed, he's going to face that. He's going to face Second Amendment folks coming at him every day because they don't like ATF. They don't think guns should be regulated, as I mentioned earlier. So that's going to be his big issue out of the box.
All right. Well, the president will be holding a big event today. We're following it. We'll follow the issue closely. Brad, Avery, thank you so much.
I'll talk about that for a second, Dee. I thought that in answering the question, he talked about how the pro-gun rights crew were the ones who were going to be responsible for making it very difficult for this nominee. When we heard Marvin talk, you didn't get that same sense of the political whenever we would hear Marvin talk about this, because, and so how does Marvin fit into this whole thing? Because I never heard that very political stance either way when it came to him.
And that's just what's interesting, because the president would almost have to say he's not pleased with the job that Marvin is doing, that he's not pleased with him. For him to skip over Marvin and go for someone else. So the first thing you have to do is you have to deal with Chip and the problems
that music playing in your background?
No, it's not. I have no music here.
Okay, let me see where that's coming. Okay, all right, go ahead.
Yeah, so the thing is, well, you have to look at David Chipman's background when you talk about how Marvin plays it. So you look at David Chipman's background, and he was, aside from all of his qualifications, he was pretty much dogged by allegations of making racial slanders. And there were a group of Republicans that attacked him on that. And then there were a group of conservative Democrats and even one moderate Democrat who was on the fence and refused to jump out there, largely because of that stuff. So I would say that the president, while he has been absolutely correct in his previous appointments, having appointed more African-American federal judges than anybody in American history, he's been absolutely tone deaf with respect to this position. So you go from one guy who is a career or has spent time in the ATF, and he is dogged by making racial slanders, and you couldn't imagine that a Democrat president would have just withdrew that from the beginning. So then that one falls, and then he comes and gets another guy who is a political loser. I mean, a guy, I don't say that in derogatory terms, but he lost a major political race when we're at a time where Democrats are trying to win Ohio. You go and get somebody who can't carry Ohio. And so he's tone deaf with respect to that. And none of that matters to me when you start talking about the matter of qualifications. And so Marvin factors in this thing because the whole nation just sat there and watched Ketanji Brown Jackson sit there and have to answer to people who were highly or much less qualified to question her, had never been in her shoes and never experienced what she had experienced. She was immensely qualified, and most of America realized and acknowledged that. We were proud that America went with somebody who was qualified, because qualifications was the main issue. Qualifications were the main issue. And then you come back and you get a guy who was given 33 years to the office, that was appointed as a second in charge by the Trump administration, comes back and gets appointed as the head official by the Biden administration in a time when very rarely is there any consensus in American politics, especially in Washington. And so not only is he qualified, well-liked, well-respected, but then you go back to this whole notion of the fact that he's Black. And I would submit that if Ketanji Brown being Black was any part of the equation, which we know it was because he had made a promise, then I think that you look at somebody like Marvin Richardson and you say, okay, if you can have undying loyalty to a pledge that you made, then what kind of loyalty do you have to the pledge that you made to keep our American cities safe? And for all of those people who are silent now, who spoke in favor of Ketanji Brown, because you're this dying, diehard liberal, because you have this loyalty, basic loyalty to the Democratic Party or Biden, I would ask you, how loyal are you to the notion of safety in our streets? And so how loyal are you to the notion of safety in our streets? Because I would submit to you that when you come up with this idea about ghost guns, I know I'm talking, but you got to stop me. But when you start talking about ghost guns, it seems like it's the new crack. It's going to be the new crack in that category of gun control. Let's have this war on ghost guns. Let's have this war on ghost guns. And so it's the same way that Bill Clinton and Democrats earlier placated to the conservative elements and played to the middle by saying we're going to get tough on something and we're going to have a buzzword. And so they say, let's get tough on drugs.
Don't leave out Mr. Biden, because he was there too.
Well, I'm just talking about, I said Democrats, I think, but it was, Clinton's there, but they were placating, trying to play to the middle by getting rough on the war on drugs, when in fact, it really was not a war on drugs. It was a war to win elections and to curry favor. And so when you start talking about ghost guns, Marvin even made a statement one time. He said, he say, who gets guns is not my responsibility, but what you do with guns is my responsibility. And that's when we get involved. And so perhaps the ATF, and I don't know what the policy is, but maybe they shouldn't be in the business of having somebody there who can make policy. Maybe they ought to stay with having an ATF that implements policy. And so when you go in and you get somebody and you tie them to this notion of what can and cannot be used, and I would say I'm anti-gun person too. I'm very liberal, extremely liberal, but I don't care a whole lot about that. But I believe that we ought to always speak up when our streets are unsafe. We've never had a permanent African-American to head the ATF. And if there's been one thing that has continued unabated in our community, that is gun control, drug abuse, and all of these things in our community. If there's one thing that has not shown a decrease, it's those things. And you chose to go and get somebody else, non-Black, when you have an opportunity. It ain't like you had a white guy who was an interim in there who was marginally qualified, and then you went and selected another white guy. You have a Black guy. Yeah, you have a Black guy there. You have an African-American there who's popular, and you know that it's going to be a fight. You walked to Chicago with him, Mr. President, and you went to Chicago. I'm not the president, but the Attorney General went to Chicago and they announced a plan to fight drugs and crime in our cities. And yet he can go to Chicago, but he can't go to the rest of America on your behalf. I just think it's foul. And I think that someone needs to speak up. And since we know that ATF agents can't speak up, and since we know that congressmen will not speak up, the question is, who will speak up for the people who are suffering from drugs and crime on our streets in America?
Yeah, let's talk about that for a second, and let's talk about how we got here, because even as we talk about this, we just had the subway shooting that just happened in Brooklyn on yesterday. And so we're talking about, and that's, I think, what we were alluding to earlier, where you've got someone in a position who has the prerequisites required for the position. That is the law enforcement side, as well as, if he's going to talk about ghost guns, not only has Marvin been on the streets with ghost guns, but that's where he comes from. And so he's got an eminent background in the things that are required for the position. And so how does Biden escape from this when, as he said there, he appointed a Black woman as a Supreme Court justice, and sitting over here in a position, as you just alluded to, Dwayne, sitting in the position is someone who is eminently qualified for the position, and he skips over that. Now, so my question is, Dwayne, was this a distraction so that he could then make this move? I mean, and I hate to say that that was a distraction, because clearly he could have just as easily come out and said, I'm going to appoint the most eminently qualified justice to the Supreme Court, and done the same thing and picked her. And everybody would have been satisfied. So, but now, was that a distractor so that nobody could then make any type of claim concerning that when he does this and goes and gets this career prosecutor and ignores a highly qualified, eminently qualified person who is currently running the ATF?
Well, I don't think he, obviously, you know, he didn't appoint Judge Jackson to be a diversion. I mean, obviously he believed in her. She's immensely qualified to be that. So I don't think that was a diversion, but I thought that the appointment of Diedelbach right after all of the celebrations, and when he could have done it a week ago, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, I think that was conveniently placed. And he did use the fact that he had a lot of political will on his side right now. And the reason that Marvin is not there, the reason that he could get by, you were talking about, you know, how he could do this. The reason he get it is because of blind loyalty. The fact is that blind loyalty, whether it's in the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, the reason that he could do this is because there are more people that would rather see Biden be successful as president. There are more people that would rather see him not be under attack by the right wing, that they would sacrifice safety in their streets as long as they have the White House. And it's the same way on the other side. So this is not a Biden thing. This is a political thing. And so the reality of it is that he gets away with it because of blind loyalty. You know, I think you have a lot of Black women that I remember when Vice President Kamala Harris was running, you know, she had her sorors. They came out for her. They came out for her all over the country. It didn't really matter what her credentials were at the time. We know that she's qualified too, but they came out for her. Black women all over the country made sure that Biden held true to his promise that he would appoint a Black woman. They stayed faithful and loyal, and rightfully so. The question is, why isn't somebody who is given the task of protecting our streets, who's already in the position, why isn't there not blind loyalty to this Black man?
Right.
Who we know, Marvin. Yeah.
Let me ask you this question too, because, you know, in my 25 years as a federal agent, I saw this time and time again, where somebody would be brought in outside of the agency, and the FBI continues to do it, and they typically use lawyers to be directors and head of the agency. President Biden also said Steve's record, quote, Steve records make him ready on day one to lead this agency. I mean, does that sound right to you?
It doesn't sound like an endorsement of his qualifications. It sounds like he's ready to lead an agenda. It doesn't, from what you read, I didn't see it, but it doesn't sound like an endorsement of his immense qualifications. It sounds like his endorsement of his ability to lead an agenda. And if that agenda is anything but addressing drugs and alcohol and guns abuse and misuse in our cities, then that agenda is misplaced.
Yeah.
So I was thinking when you look at this, when you look at the fact that one of the statements that I saw on the CNN article, which I thought was very poignant, was this statement that was here, and it said that this guy Dettelbach is relatively unknown among groups with interest in gun issues. That has raised skepticism among law enforcement groups, which often play a large role in the political debate over the ATF. And then they made this great statement, which says, it's also unclear what the nomination means for Marvin Richardson, the current acting director, a veteran agent who is popular among ATF employees and agents. So that goes to the point that it's almost like Biden had to step over him in order to do this. And so why would he be willing to do that? And here's a question for you, Dwayne, the really political question is, who did or did not advocate for Marvin? I mean, I know Merrick Garland is the Attorney General. What happened, and what do you think happened in that process that allowed this guy, Dettelbach, to be nominated?
Yeah, let me clarify this. You know, I love President Biden. I think he's doing a wonderful job, but it's not like he had to step over Marvin. He stepped over Marvin. And so need to clarify that he stepped over Marvin, because there's no doubt that he had to go over a man who he knows and who he knows to have been more qualified. And I think that when you talk about he's getting some bad advice, people were so happy with Judge Jackson. They were so happy with the incredible number of judicial appointments that he's made. He appointed one of my good friends to be a federal judge. And so people all over the country know that he has done a tremendous job of appointing people of color to the bench. But it still gets to the point, it's not even about Dettelbach. This is not even about Dettelbach, because he could have appointed one of you guys, and we shouldn't be questioning whether or not Wayne or Carlin is more, we wouldn't be questioning about you all's qualifications. This ought to be about who's there right now. And it's Marvin. And so when you talk about Marvin going to Fort Worth, I know that it was funny. Nobody probably been, I was doing some voter registration not too long ago, and I said, I doubt that there's anybody in Texas over the last 20 years who has registered more people to vote than Dwayne Charleston. And I'm not bragging about that. It's just that that's the one thing that I'm pretty good at. And I've registered them not to vote for Republicans, but to vote for Democrats. And, I was one of the witnesses when they were talking about redistricting. I was a special witness at the State House. In fact, I've done some stuff in some politics, but when you think about the fact that he came to Fort Worth and you had a lot of people who showed up in Fort Worth, but that Congressman, Mark Veazey, who represents the district in which Marvin was, did not show up, did not send a letter, did not send a representative. I think that he's the one who needs to be held accountable, because if he's got crime in his streets, and no doubt he does in Fort Worth, then why isn't he even speaking up on behalf of Marvin? I think that he needs to be held accountable, and more accountable than anybody else. You can't hold Cruz, or you're not going to hold Cruz and Cornyn accountable. We would like to think that they would support Marvin, but we can't expect that either, because if Biden appointed Marvin, they would figure out a way to attack him as well. But right now, you got to go to the congressman. Why aren't the congressmen in Texas? There are 4 African-American congressmen in Texas, and only one has made some vague show of support, and that would be Eddie Bernice Johnson, and she's outgoing to support Marvin. Why? Sheila Jackson Lee and Al Green. Al Green's his frat brother, our frat brother. Why wouldn't he stand up? These guys know about it because I sent them letters, and they know about it. And so it's crazy. And I think it's like we're sacrificing crime on our streets because we're believing that ghost guns are the issue, when in fact it's not ghost guns that are the issue. It's crime on our streets that are the issue. And we need to get somebody who can attack crime on the streets and not ghost guns, or not primarily ghost guns, because ghost guns, just like any other guns, like Marvin says, is what you do with the guns that that gets ATF involved.
That kind of leads into another question I have for you, because we are seeing a surge. Here in Sacramento, a couple weeks ago, we had a nightclub, 2 a.m, 5 people killed, another 15 or 16, you hear about that, shot.
Yeah.
It's just crazy. And of course, yesterday what happened in New York. So we are seeing a surge, and so it kind of goes back to that question again. Why would the president, who has this individual, Marvin Richardson, who is familiar with the community, he has ties with the community. You guys were just with him when he was going on tour, connecting with people and connecting with the community. Why would he pass over someone like that to go with somebody who has spent his life prosecuting people, instead of building relationships with people? Why?
Well, Ohio is a battleground state, and I don't know what Dieter Bach brings to the game, but make no mistake about it, he's from Ohio and Marvin's from Texas. And so if you can look at those 2 areas right there, you may get a little bit insight into the political motivations of that. But the reality of it is, I don't think that crime is that we're seeing a surge of crimes. We're seeing a surge of social media. We're seeing a surge of the ability to cover it and all of the stuff that happens. No doubt, man, for decades, there were crimes that were taking place, and multiple homicides that were taking place that wouldn't even make the news. They may make the local newspaper, but now it's so easy for it to run up the chain and be known. So I don't think that it's anymore. But one thing I do say is that we're still missing the point when we say we're going to have a war on guns. When you're not talking about having a war on crime, and making a war on crime means having somebody who can go in like Marvin, and who can speak to the community, who can motivate and rally, and who can inspire the community, and you can make a difference within the community. I don't know that Dieter Bach has probably ever even been in a Black church, for all I know, except maybe when he was campaigning. I don't know that he's ever been an undercover doing anything. And so I just can't see how, I can see how, because I know it's political, he's in Ohio. But it would be more impressive to me if he had won a race in Ohio and Biden was trying to achieve a bigger objective to win Ohio. But this brother lost a race in Ohio. And for somehow you think that that's going to benefit you, all that's going to do is raise the political stakes and create a wider political divide, while at the same time, nobody's paying attention to my friend Tisha, who her son was murdered sitting in a car in Dallas County recently, and all the other murders that take place all over the country. It's sad. It's a tragedy. And Carlin, we need to do a SIG-Ep run.
Yeah. And so, and that's so huge, because, you know, you're looking at this and just anybody just looking at this objectively would see, but I'm still concerned and want to hear you say this, Dwayne, because I understand that you're saying congressmen, they have a role and they should be held accountable. They need to speak up. But I'm actually trying to get inside of the White House now and go, what happened in this process? Because I'm thinking the number one law enforcement officer in the country is the Attorney General. And so that's Merrick Garland. Did he not have the fortitude? Did he not speak up? And that's what I really want to know. What do you think? Did he speak up and was shut down by the political machine, or did he not speak up at all on behalf of this guy who's already?
And I couldn't begin to answer that. I don't know what happens. I know that the political director, Biden's political director, was supportive of Marvin. I don't even know the person's name, but I know because of the letter that the person received and how he responded back to us that they were responsive. But the reality of it is, Marvin's law enforcement, and you'll never know, because Marvin can't speak up. Marvin is not going to speak up, just like you're not going to criticize the commanding general, the U.S. Marines, when you're active duty. And that's why they can get away with this stuff, because no matter how popular he is, or it is reported that he is, those individuals are not going to speak up on the record. And that's how you can get away with getting somebody who's less qualified. And he knows that Marvin is most qualified. I was so upset the other day. It's just a matter of qualifications, and it's not even rocket science. This is not rocket science.
Right.
It's not. We don't even have to care. This is not rocket science. Ketanji had America proud that a woman who was most qualified got the confirmation.
Mm-hmm.
And then we just go back another 30 years. A week later, we go back another 30 years and appoint an old white guy who's not qualified over a black guy who has 32 years experience and has been appointed by two different administrations. It's not even close. It's not even close. And this ought to be the issue of the day.
So last question. And so what happens in the end here? If Dettelbach goes, even if he's approved as a nominee, what does he do? Does he bring in his own crew and they scrap all the knowledge and expertise that have been a part of the ATF for the last at least 4 or 5 years? Or does he try to get someone like Marvin to come in and say, and use his expertise and knowledge? What does he do?
No, they go hire a good marketing firm, and a good marketing firm that convinces America that ghost guns are the biggest issue facing our streets in America.
Oh man!
And so that's what they do. And Marvin, he ages out and he's forced to retire, and they don't have to deal with him. They'll do a ceremony for him, give him a few pins or something like that. But it'll be a marketing firm, and it'll be our new crack, and everybody will think ghost guns are the thing that's killing us. And then we'll start giving long sentences to people who use ghost guns. I would submit, if he was really wanting to get rid of ghost guns, he probably would have hired somebody from Amazon. He would have hired somebody that understands how you can track things down by using computer stuff. And you could have hired somebody from Amazon and paid them really big money to come and show you how do you put these pieces together and determine where the stuff is coming from. And now you go get a prosecutor. No. It's just
Dwayne, that kind of reminds me of back in the 80s, what you were talking about earlier with the Clinton administration and the drugs and all that and stuff. Like, if they really wanted to stop it at that time, they could have stopped it.
Yeah.
So
and I'm not saying that they can stop drug violence in our communities right now, but I am saying that you have an opportunity to give a guy one good opportunity and one good shot to implement his plan without looking over his shoulder and wondering when is his interim appointment going to expire. And I think that Marvin deserved the chance because he's qualified and because we need somebody who can address that. I'm not saying that we will win and that we will eradicate drugs and illegal guns and all the other things off of the street. But, there are other things, like the federal government is about to approve marijuana, probably in all 50 states. And when they approve that, for all we know, this could have something to do with making sure somebody's in place to capitalize on marijuana if ATF if it becomes alcohol, tobacco, firearms, and marijuana, which is what's being proposed. It could be, y'all. We don't know. We don't know. We could speculate. We could be talking heads. I don't care what. We don't know. So all we do know is that Diedelbach can't hold the candle to Marvin Richardson when it comes to qualifications, and that should be the basis and foundation and the only argument that goes forward to the president.
Good. Hey, we want to thank you. Boy, that 30 minutes went by really fast. We covered a lot of territory there. Thankful to have my brother D-Wayne on the Wayne Carlin Show. A lot of good information there. We'll make sure we get this posted out to YouTube and everybody can get access to this, because I think we need to really begin thinking about these things, and people need to begin making a stake on some of these claims with our politicians and in our communities, because we're facing this across the board in our communities now with a surge in crime, homicides, and everything going up. We've got to make some decisions, people. And I think we need to think about these things before we start putting our weight behind certain politicians and certain people who are not acting in our best interest. So thank you, Dee.
Can I say one thing, Carlin?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
You remember Richard Pryor's show when he had lost someone in his family died, and that Doberman stopped chasing him? Oh, and then he looked at Richard. He said, "You know I'm gonna be chasing you tomorrow again, don't you? You know we're gonna be fighting again tomorrow, don't you?"
Yep. Yep.
All right.
Hey, so good show, and so
Definitely.
Wayne.
All right, brothers. Good to have y'all on here again. The Charleston brothers. Hey, it was smooth too. Look. All right. So we'll see y'all again next week. And remember, I'm Wayne.
I'm Carlin. And this is
the Wayne Carlin Show and D-Wayne.
Appreciate you. Appreciate you.
All right. That's good.
Yep.